morning, good morning. Welcome once more to the Aurum podcast. Today, the 17th of October. A bit of apologies. We began a bit later than usual because of a few technical issues, but we are glad that whichever the case, we are here and we are beginning. And we are very excited about this podcast. Uh, the podcast today, we want to discuss a very hot topic. But before we begin, my name is Anthony Kuria. I'll be your host today. And with me, I have Zipporah, Zipporah Kuria, our HR consultant, and Martha Thuku, a HR professional. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, to our listeners, you are welcome to post your comments. We welcome your comments. In the things that we are discussing. If there's something you'd want to highlight, you'd want to understand more, please post your comments using your Facebook. And your comments or questions are very welcome. We welcome them. We would want to hear more from you. Now, ladies, today we want to discuss something that in many businesses, many corporations, people talk in whispers about it. It's not something it's not a very popular topic to talk about, but it's critical because if you're going to take care of your staff, take care of your business, it's very important for you to understand something called labor litigation. And today we want to discuss labor litigation, pitfalls, and how to avoid them. All right? So, as we begin, Martha, let me begin with you. Now, what are some of the areas of labor litigation?
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you for inviting me again. Yes,
Sure.
as you said, this is a kind of a very interesting topic, but also a cost very expensive topic. Before I begin, I can say that even as late as yesterday or the day before yesterday, I saw a clip of one of the reputable banking organizations. They had been sued and they have to pay someone they terminated wrongly, or rather they were found like they terminated them wrongly.
Yes.
They are supposed to pay over 86 million shillings. So, especially in these times of COVID and we are having economic depression, can you imagine how much that is to an organization? Going to one person and the court has already, I think that case went even to the Court of Appeal and still that decision was upheld. So that's why it's important even we talk to employers out there through this podcast, just to enlighten them on a few areas that seem so small, but they can be very expensive for an organization. In some of the areas for that can take an employer for litigation, one of them could be wrong termination, issues to do with salaries and wages disputes.
Yes.
Like in Kenya, we normally have the minimum wages, and some employers do not want to adhere to this. Some people make people work overtime, and then they don't want to pay for this. Then there are other organizations, they sever a contract before it comes to an end. Then they don't want to pay for the remaining time. Other issues could vary, coming from harassment or discrimination. So those are some of the few, and Zipporah can add others. Thank you.
All right. So Zipporah, from your end, what are some of the areas that prompt labor litigation?
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Mother, for that preamble. I think, like Mother has said, it's very important for us HR professionals, even for employers, to be very careful how we handle the employer-employee relationship. And like she's saying, actually, it's interesting because I also saw another article that was a totally different company where employees were terminated and they were not terminated probably in the right way. And they are having to pay back to these employees in tunes of millions. And I always keep on saying it doesn't always have to go down that direction if we do things the right way. One of the things I keep on saying as a business person, when I'm starting a business, I need to count the cost of running that business. I need to count the cost of having employees on board. If the service or the product I'm selling is not going to be able to remunerate the employees based on the bare minimum wage, then I'm probably having my mathematics not right. Because the moment you engage yourself in a business and you engage people, there are basic minimums you have to make sure you meet. Otherwise, you start getting into issues of litigations. And like Mother has put it very well, some of the issues are disputes that because of salary underpayment and overtimes not being paid. Other issues could be discrimination, or it could be issues to do with, for those who might have unions, you have a CBA in place and you're not meeting the obligations of that collective bargaining agreement. Um, there are other issues that would be wrongful terminations. And we are not saying employers should not terminate employees. But the question is, how do you terminate? What procedures do you use to end up terminating that employee? Are those terminations legal? Are they called for? Or am I going to be the kind of an employer that I wake up in the morning, I don't like Mother's face, I want Mother out, and I automatically tell Mother, I need you to exit. And there's no procedure I'm following, there's no justification for that termination. These are issues actually that bring about legal implications. When you look at the current scenario we've been of COVID, many of us have sent employees on unpaid leave or on reduced wage bill. How we handle these situations? Because these are the same issues that bring about challenges. If I'm going to alter your employment, or if I'm going not to pay your salary as agreed in the contract, what method have I used to get to that agreement with you? Am I making a decision just as an employer, or are we having a conversation with you, the employee, for me to be able to get to that place of an agreement with you that is mutual, that we've agreed these are going to be the terms for this season because of these reasons. And this is so within the labor where you have to make sure if you're going to alter my contract for whatever reasons, then there has to be some sort of a mutual agreement. So there's a lot of things actually that bring about this kind of legal litigations that are
All right, all right. Yeah, thank you for those points. I like the way you've collaborated with Martha. Issues to do with wrongful termination. Picked up a few points like wrongful termination, issues to do with pay disputes, issues to do with harassment and discrimination. However, ladies, is there something else that we can add? For example, just thinking from my own theoretical experience, something you can get labor litigation because of workplace injury. You've gotten injured in the course of duty, either injured or you got sick. Uh, could you probably, Martha, probably you could expound briefly on issues of workplace sickness or injury, how they come up with labor litigation?
Yeah, it's true, Tony, that can come up because then, as I said, all these things are outlined in, especially in Kenya, our employment labor laws. They explain everything, especially on the issue of in workplace injury and a workman. I think it's called WIBA.
Yes,
So it's important that the organizations have in place the insurance
yes,
that would cover that instances, because when someone is they go through an injury, an accident, and they're in the workplace, then you just send them home. And you can imagine at times, so such injuries could be, total disability, meaning that the employee may not even come back to work, or
yes,
maybe they lose any of their body parts.
yes,
So if you don't have an insurance to pay that, then you send the employee home because then they can't work because they are
yes,
totally disabled. What
yes,
does that mean? They will take you to court because you are supposed to insure against that. So that if they're totally disabled, then there is some money, it's leverage when they go home that can take them through for the next part of their life. Thank you.
All right.
I
Zippy, do
think
you have any?
if you can allow me to actually add on what Mother has said, workplace injury has become another hot one for legal suits. And sometimes you find we have what we call ambulance chasers. And especially if you as an employer, you don't know what you need to have in place to safeguard yourself and safeguard your employees. You will find yourself in scenarios where an employee got injured. This probably was not handled in the right way. And before you realize, you have a very major legal litigation. Now, besides just having the waiver, like Mother as well put it out, and this is well in the labor laws in the Waiver Act, which employers I urge you, please read the Labor Act, read and understand the Waiver Act, understand what laws govern employees and govern the workplace to avoid being in such situations. You will find very simple scenarios where an employee gets hurt. This is not even reported because probably there are no procedures on how to report an injury in the workplace. And this ends up becoming a very major issue. So besides just following the WIBA, it's important to also sensitize employees, have policies in place, have the necessary committees as per the Act, and ensure in the event of an injury, no matter how minor it is, it's documented, is well taken care of. If that employee needs to go to the hospital, they are taken to the hospital, that incident is recorded, that incident is actually reported as per the given guidelines, so that again, you don't find yourself in some of these scenarios. What actually has been shocking me, and that's why I'm encouraging employers to at least try and understand the laws that govern the employee-employer relationship, is many employers don't even know about some of these laws. They don't know actually they're supposed to register their workplaces with the ministry. They don't know that they're supposed to do certain returns every year. So it's important for us not to be ignorant of these laws and understand them, because if we don't, then our employees get in trouble, and in eventuality we actually get up in very, very big issues. I've had scenarios where an employee has died and the company did not even have a WIBA in place. Now, this the court is not an employee going to court, but this is a network team going to court to sue you for not actually compensating for the same. And this again comes to the issue you're bringing about the work injury. If an employee gets injured or they die while at the workplace, then as an employer, what do I need to do? So it's important for us to be aware there are laws that govern this, and it's important for us as employers to know we need to read and understand, because ignorance is not defense. You can't go to court and say, I did not know. If you get caught up in that situation, then you have to deal with it.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. That the issue of the reasons for the areas for labor litigations, as we have seen, there are quite a number. It could be, as we've said, issues to do with termination, disputes, harassment and discrimination, and now workplace injury, even illness. You know, depending on where you're working, you as an employer, you might be doing everything right. Then somebody leaves, and then they go find out that the reason why they were ill was because of the workplace environment. So preparing yourself for such disputes is very important, with things like taking care of it through things like employer's liability. But now let's move on to the next question, which we want to look that. Let's look at some of the areas of potential discrimination. Yes. Let us look at some of the areas of potential discrimination. Martha, what could be some of these areas where
Okay, I would speak of like unfair treatment by managers,
all right,
by co-workers or others, because either of a person's race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation or gender, you know, even areas of pregnancy, age, disability, So those are some of the potential discrimination areas where people, even you can find they are denied reasonable accommodation in the workplace because of their religion, because of they are disabled, because they are pregnant. Some are even retaliated upon because of maybe making a complaint of a job or someone, and they could go even to sexual harassment, and
Yes.
yeah, which is a major. So I will just first leave that so that Zipporah can add more.
Yes. All right. Zippy, what are some of the areas which you can add to what Martha is listed?
I think Mother has put it very well, and the area of discrimination is actually another big one when it comes to legal litigations. And sometimes I actually don't know whether that discrimination is out of ignorance or is out of not knowing. Because,
Yes.
like Mother said, some of the potential areas are things like gender, things like sexual harassment or sexual orientation, things like, and I know we are a Christian nation, but the truth is, all of us are not probably prescribing to the same values. But as an employer, are you going to discriminate? How are you going to handle such kind of scenarios when you find yourself in a situation where people ascribe to different ways of life?
Yeah.
Issues to do with pregnancy. This is a big one for most employers,
Mhm.
and most of our employees are in the childbearing age. But because we don't want to pay for maternity leave for 3 months and have to get someone to hold fort for that person, then what
Yes.
happens? We start finding ways to let that person go. We start finding ways to mistreat this person to make them feel frustrated, and they end up leaving the organization. And this is actually should be a caution to most employers. If you are employing a young generation, truth be told, you need to plan for it. I'm sure we need to be at that place where we value families. I keep on saying our age, sooner or later, we are going to get out of the marketplace. We are going to need a generation that will come in and take
Mm.
us. Then it's going to be a bit of a challenge in the future because we're not going to have a generation that is able to work. So we should not even be discriminating these people in the first place. I remember beginning of this year, we had 2 employees who had to go on maternity leave, and we are not a very big organization. And I was scratching my head and thinking, how do we handle this? Because it will affect your cash flow because
Sure.
their work has to be done by someone else. And COVID at the same time still hit. But does that give me the moral authority to actually discriminate this person or terminate their contract, and procedurally that will put me in a legal scenario? It shouldn't. And we should find ways of dealing with these kind of issues. So discrimination is a big one, and we need to be careful. We need to come up with policies on how do we handle these situations when an employee is being faced with this kind of a situation. Is there a way they know this is what I need to do if I'm sexually harassed? Do I know what I need to do if I'm mistreated because I'm expectant? Some employees shy away from coming, forward and saying, I'm
Yeah.
expecting, and it should be a celebration. I mean, from where I see it, it's a celebration. But most of them will not come out because they are shy. They are going to be mistreated. If I'm having a difficult pregnancy, I might be terminated just because of that. But the truth is, the law protects the employees. So, as an employer, what do I need to do? I need to safeguard myself by making sure I have the necessary policies. And, like I've said, I need to count my costs even before I start engaging these employees and knowing these are the potential areas of expense. Am I going to be able to accommodate this?
Aha. All
And
right.
Tony, I wanted to add a bit on the
Please do.
discussion with Zippy on discrimination.
Yes.
Another area is especially the area of HIV/AIDS. If
Mm.
you can be discriminated even by your fellow employees. So when they get to
Yes.
know you are HIV positive, you just find
Yes.
people just discriminating you. Now the latest is the COVID-19. The
Aha.
people who have tested positive, Like in my organization, my executive director keeps reminding us when someone has tested, we got 2 or 3 cases, and the first thing she would say is, ensure that person is not discriminated. Because,
Yeah.
people, when they hear someone has got COVID-19, they don't want to relate with that person.
Yeah.
And even someone has come with a negative results, they have gone through the motions, they have been treated, and now they are negative. But people, when they return to work, no one wants to relate to them. That is
Mm,
also discrimination. So
mm.
there's a lot of discrimination happening in organizations, and they need to somehow, yeah, and that's why we have this discussion, so that then we can let the employers know how to safeguard themselves against all these things that can take them to court and cost a lot of money. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha. Wow. This, as I said earlier, as we began, this is a hot topic. There are things that both of you have, areas of discrimination that you have raised, and we welcome the comments. Thank you, Shali Nyamori. Thank you for cheering us on. You are happy to see us on together with Martha. We welcome more and more of your comments, especially in relation to potential areas of discrimination. There's something, Martha, you've said there about illness. Somebody is ill, and discrimination is not just by employer to employee. It is even now amongst employees, where somebody is having, was diagnosed with COVID, like now, and now people are treating you like you have leprosy, yeah, or
Yeah.
people think, man, you're going to spread this thing to me. And now there's also something else that Zipporah has also brought up, issues to do with pregnancy. I personally have seen it happen in a few organizations that I'm working, and some of them are high end. But I remember when ladies would be pregnant, and some of them are in senior positions, the company, the very top, the chief executive would make very derogatory comments about the women who are getting pregnant, or even ask the men who want to go for paternity leave. You would hear the comments that are coming forth, and now is when I'm realizing that was actually discrimination. That was potentially litigious in the way it was coming through. It's also something else that you've brought in, the issue of physical deformity. Somebody has come to work, the employer has purposed that I'm going to hire this person, in spite of them not probably having, they can't walk pretty well, or they have issues to do with whatever it is. And now that also now becomes an issue of discrimination, either by the rest of the staff or by some members of the company. Then there's also something you brought up, the issue of sexual harassment. I'm sure you two ladies, and I'm sure even our listeners, especially our female listeners, I'm sure this is something that subtly, in a subtle manner, this is something ladies go through all the time. Comments made, barbs thrown out, innuendos coming in, and a company could be in a potentially dangerous place if this becomes a culture. Now, let me go to the third question, the third point that I would want to bring in. How do we as employers fall into legal challenges? Zipporah, probably you could start with this one. How do we as employers end up in this hole of legal challenges?
Let me start saying, as employers, we fall into these legal challenges because, number one, we lack the understanding of the labor laws. Let's start from there.
Mm,
Because if I
mhm.
understand what the labor laws say, I will be
Yes.
very careful how I handle the employer-employee relationship because I know
Mhm.
where the potential risks are. So that is the
Yes.
first place. So things like
Yes.
contractual agreements, we give a contract to an employee, then we don't actually honor that contract. At some point, we start deviating from the agreement with the employee. So that is
Mhm.
an area where, sorry, we fall into challenges. The other area is where we have not prescribed to certain policies that would guide the organization. We've talked a lot about discrimination. Now, take an example like with sexual harassment. So, this could be coming from fellow employees. So does an employer or does that employee know what they're supposed to do in the event they're sexually harassed? What constitutes sexual harassment? Are those things clearly defined so that, again, an employee knows if this happens to me, then this needs to be my reaction and I should not keep quiet about it. Otherwise, it becomes a culture, like you're saying, and the employer, the business owner, might not even be aware this is happening in his organization until there's a legal issue. So how do we sensitize employees to understand this is not going to be entertained, this is not going to be condoned? Sometimes discrimination comes from within employees, okay? Have we sensitized our employees to understand you cannot discriminate against another person because of race or because they are enabled differently, Have we sensitized our employees? Have we come up with different policies to guide our employees? This is what should happen, or this is what should not happen. The other thing I would say is we have open door policies. We have a way of employee giving us feedback, or are we caught up in our corner office and we are blind as to what is happening in our organization until we are having these challenges? There's a lot of things, as employers, we can do to avoid getting into these legal challenges. Things like honoring contractual agreements, which I've mentioned, things like grievance mechanism, an employee has a grievance. Do they know if I have a grievance, then where do I go? Is it my immediate manager? If I have a grievance against my immediate manager, then what? I'm afraid of going to HR because I'll be seen like I'm reporting them, I've seen scenarios where employees suffer in silence because they are so afraid. So what are we doing as employers or as HR managers to demystify this and to empower the employee to know I have a right like every other person employed in this organization, and there are some things that I cannot allow to happen to me. So even as we continue discussing, I will allow Mother to say something about this particular subject because it's a big one. Then we'll keep on discussing on the same.
Yes, Martha. From your perspective, what are some of how do employers end up in this hole called legal challenges?
I agree totally with what Zipporah has contributed, and most employers end up like this because then, as we have said, maybe they don't know the law or they don't just care. Maybe they know the law and they don't just care. So I remember when the new labor law came out, the organization I was working with then, we were taken to a place for training for that new labor law, and one of the trainers was one of the lawyers who wrote that law.
Okay.
And what they told us was that there are so many organizations where Kenyans are suffering because they do not know what to do and they do not even understand the law. So first of all, it's very important for Kenyans to understand their rights, because when an employer knows you don't understand your rights, then they have this thing, they can misuse you, and nothing would happen to you. But some of the employers who actually have understands many things, there are some things they don't do. They should know that the minimum is the country's labor law. So whatever is laid out there, that is the minimum. And so if someone is not practicing the minimum, then they are falling into potential legal challenges sooner or later. The other thing is that then when you have the labor laws, then in the organization, you should come up with guidelines, laid down guidelines, SOPs, policies in the very various areas, especially touching on matters with human resource. Because then, if you don't have those guidelines and everyone is doing what they want, people have the tendency of running an organization like their own kiosk. So ad hoc decisions. Oh, Martha, fire this one. You know, doing what? So if you don't have the SOPs, then
Yeah.
then you find yourself you're going to be in a lot of problems. Also, so in areas matter handling, mishandling employees, terminating areas concerning compensation and benefits are very important. The other reason that people, the employers fall into legal challenges is
Yes.
because they refuse to engage labor lawyers. I know labor lawyers are very expensive, some of them, but not all of them. So there are
Sure.
those who are high end, and there are those
Yes.
who can be fit for your pocket. It's very important because you can't, even the HR can't read the law completely. We
Yes.
always have a very good idea about what is required, but it's always good to have someone who is in the legal, who understands these things, and you can always keep engaging them. Thank you very much.
Wow, wow. Martha, you have given some heavy points there for our listeners who are listening. And I can see quite a number are thinking, Martha, you are making this place smoke. Can see Pamela Yeke is saying, great conversation. Indeed, ignorance of labor laws is a major issue. And indeed it is. We appreciate your comments here, Pamela. Keep them coming because I'm listening to some of the things that are coming here, issues to do with lack of grievance mechanism, lack of open door policy, policies, lack of SOPs to prevent harassment, and failure to understand labor laws by both employers and employees. And as the topic was about employers finding themselves in legal challenges, and probably out there are people who are thinking now, this is a lot of load to carry as an employer, as a small business. How am I supposed to understand all these? How am I supposed to know all the labor laws? Then now I have issues to do with taxes. I have issues to do with marketing. I have issues to do with this and that, and all these questions may come in. So what would like to tell prospective employers, businesses, and all that, as Zipporah had alluded earlier, you just need a bit of understanding. Understand, what does the labor law, what is the minimum the government requires of me if I am hiring people? What are issues to do with contracts? Issues to do like registering my workplace, registering my workplace with the Ministry of Labor. Some of these processes, you'll be very shocked. The amount that it takes to begin up, it's not much. But as Martha said earlier, ignorance is no defense. If you think that failing to register your workplace with the ministry or failing to follow contracts is a simple way, trust me, when you go before a judge who does not care, you will be in very serious trouble. Now, let me bring the fourth.
Actually, allow me to say something. I've picked from
Yes.
Martha about, sometimes as HR people, you'll find an employer telling you, I need you to get rid of this person. And from where you sit as an HR, there's no justification. It could be something that is not as major as it's being alluded to be. So the question to most HR managers who might be listening to us today is, how do you handle this scenario? Are you going to go and fulfill the wishes of your employer without following the legal precepts that have been set? Or are you going to make sure whatever is done correctly, and you're not going to fire someone unnecessarily? I've seen situations where an employee, for instance, is not performing. What have we done as employers to actually help that employee perform better? Have we trained this employee? Are we coached? Are we done everything possible to assist this employee before we get to the place of saying, you know what, I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore? And it's a relationship and it can be ended. But the question is, how do you end this relationship? Is it justified for you to end this relationship? I keep on hearing employers saying the law does not favor the employers. And sometimes I tend to dispute with that fact. because a lot of times we don't want to do things right. We want to do things in a hurry. We want to make haphazard decisions, like Mother has said, and we
Yes.
want things to work our way. It never works like that. You have to remember the employee is the weaker vessel in this relationship. So the law has to also defend the employee, because if you are to put the bull and like a goat, the bull will win at the end of the day. Yeah, so
Yes.
you have to make sure the employee is safeguarded. But more so as employers, and I keep on saying, as an employer, I want to be an employer of choice. Is what value system am I putting in place? Am I ascribing to? And am I creating that culture that employees will want to be associated with my company? So it comes down to also what we are doing as employers. What is the purpose of this business I'm running in the first place? Am I just
Correct.
running it purely for the money? Or is it that there's a value I am adding to the community, to the society I'm living in? And I think when we start answering these questions, then we will start seeing the employee as the major challenge here. And I'm not saying that employees don't come with challenges. Employees come with a lot of challenges, but sometimes they need a bit of guidance here and there for them to be able to walk in the right direction. You brought up an issue of, no, it's Mother who has mentioned employers need to engage legal advisors. Again, if you're not in a position to engage a legal advisor, some of the employers don't even have an HR office or an HR person they can consult. If you're not in a position to employ a full-time HR person, then you need to reach out probably to a consultant who will be there to give you advice. They might not be your full-time employee, but they can give you advice as and when you need the same. And the cost might be a little bit lesser for you, but at the end of the day, you end up getting the necessary support that you need. So there's a lot of things employers can actually do to safeguard themselves from getting into these challenges.
Wow. Yes, those are very good points, Zipporah. To those listening to us, you're wondering where you'll get a HR consultant to help you. We can assist you we at Aurum Consultants. We can be of help in that direction. Now, I'll bring up one of the last point that I wanted us to discuss today, and it's very simple. Can labor litigations be avoided? Martha, what's your take?
Yes, Tony. Can labor litigations be avoided? I would say to the most extent, yes. And some of those, Zipporah has kind of alluded to that. So for me, my take is the first thing is there are some organizations who have taken HR as just another department, so they can put just anyone there. So let's say maybe it's a bank. You just take one of the clerks and put them in the HR. Then they call it personnel and run papers. I first want to come out clearly and say that the work of a HR manager is not running papers. We are educated, we have been trained on this. We have been trained to be our organization advisors. And if you do not value the role of HR, I can promise you sooner or later you'll get into trouble with the law. Because then they are your eye when you cannot see, because then you're busy with other things. And then to avoid litigation, Anthony, it starts with the basics, and it starts from the hiring process.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we need to exercise care in hiring.
Yes.
That is the single best way of avoiding employee lawsuits. In
Yes.
just having careful hiring processes.
Uh-huh.
You need to know and follow your company's hiring policies and procedures. This can only be done by HR. So I can really ask organizations, it's good I'm not really here to promote the HR role. I'm just trying to say you need people who understand this. Yeah.
Yes.
There are some places where a manager will just come and tell the HR person, we have an open position here, and here is a CV, I would want you to hire this person. Then you don't even know who you're hiring.
Yes.
My advice would be that a written application sound interview process, reference checking, background checks are very important. A resume cannot be the end that you think that person is qualified for that position. You know, also the hiring process includes even finding out the employment history. You need someone who verify that CV. They need to check the dates and the reasons for leaving the previous employer. You can find even in the CV there are frequent changes in employment. You know, someone was employed in January in this organization, then 3 months later they are coming to your organization. What is the reason? A manager will not have time to follow up on that. But that's why the HR is there to check on this and accounted for gaps in employment, leaving of previous jobs, because you don't know who you're going to recruit. Another issue that can land, there's a potential to land employers in problems is handling of employees' documents, employment contracts and everything. My take is always document, document, document. It can make a difference between a good defense in a court of law and one that can make you lose. Keeping records is very important. You know, you'll find a case that would take you to court with someone who is now being fired. They can say it's a performance issue. But yet, we have managers, when they're evaluating, they will never put these performance issues in writing. So the documentation you have, we don't just want you to document, we want you to document the correct thing. Because then, if this person is always surpassing or their KPIs, and then now you have released them because of lack of performance, you see, those documents, you can't take them to a labor court.
No.
So that is called inaccurate employee evaluations. Someone is not doing a good job, you want them hired, but you want them fired, but the records speak something different.
Yes.
So for this particular issue, especially where there is a termination due to poor performance, it is also important to have those uncomfortable evaluations. It's okay to give someone a negative evaluation and also document it, because it will reflect in some time, later. Zipporah talked about laying down code of ethics, policies, and procedures. It is, you know, when you take a person if someone takes you to court and you say that they didn't follow our policies, our code of conduct, you know, it is implied in the contract that you are expected to read the policies of the organization. You know, the organization I worked for, so I think a driver he defrauded some money, but he said he was never trained on the fraud policy. So my advice would be then, can we train all our employees on if we have the policies in place, can we train them? Just because they are expected to familiarize themselves doesn't mean they do. So regular or periodic trainings are very important, especially on the policies you consider zero tolerance, because then those ones are for instance dismissals. So for me, that's some of the things I would take that would make someone not be able, you know, when you have all these things in place, then there's a thin line of being taken to court. And even let's talk about the issue of documentation in termination. You know, even when you are hiring or you have a labor lawyer, they will ask you for those documents. So you need to have them, because even in the labor law, there is a procedure to follow. Actually, it's laid out there. It's ABCD. Did you follow ABCD procedure? Yes, and I'll leave Zippy to add others.
Wow. Thank you, Martha. I really, really love what you have said about documentation, because just to respond to the question Anthony asked, about can labor litigations be avoided. Yes, majorly they can be avoided, but there are instances where you find probably that issue still went to court because either of the way it was handled or it was completely beyond you. Now, I keep on saying for you to really win any labor case in court, the only defense you have is your documentation and your process of documentation. If you do not have that, the truth is you end up losing these cases. I've seen scenarios where the employer actually had a case to let an employee go, and they let them go. But the documentation part was lacking and it was missing. So guess what happens? And this is where employers end up feeling the Lord works against us. Because there was no documentation, these employers actually end up losing these cases. So like Mother as well put it out, as an employer, as an HR person, make sure your documentation is foolproof. You can get legal cases, but you can win them because your documentation is right. Now, the other thing I always keep on saying, in the event you find yourself in a situation where there's a dispute, because disputes are the ones that end up in court, engage dialogue. Get to understand where is this dispute coming from. Try and use the human face to resolve these challenges before they get out of hand. Sometimes we ignore these challenges and eventually they end up going to court. I'm sure most employees don't want to go to court because they know these cases might drag in court for a very long time. They probably don't have the resources to even do that. And they are looking at ways to have a dialogue with the employer. Engage dialogue. Don't let these things get out of hand. You have to remember, as an organization, if you're the kind of an organization that your name keeps on appearing in the labor court, then there's a problem somewhere and you need to address those issues because it could be systemic issues in your organization you need to address. The other thing is employers on issues to do with policy, like Mother has said. We normally like putting it in the contract about the HR manual, the HR policy, and telling the employees your responsibility to read this document. But the truth be told, if you are to end up with a legal scenario, this employee will say, I am not aware about any HR manual in place because you have not taken time to actually train your employees on the same. So don't just even train them. Make sure they acknowledge that they've been trained on these manuals, on these policies, and they have signed off on the same, that I have actually been trained and I understand. Where they do not understand, then make them understand. Make the document available for them so that even for them, they are well educated, they are well in the know of the do's and the don'ts within the organization so that they also don't get in trouble blindly and end up losing their livelihoods. So it's important from both ends. Let's make sure we are doing the right thing by educating our employees as employers, by ensuring we are having the necessary documentation.
Yes, thank you, ladies. You have really.
Okay, Tony, Tony, I want to add that.
Please go ahead.
So that education is very important. That it is very clear. So on every part of the policy, on the code of ethics, what have you outlined are your zero tolerance policies. You need to go one by one and maybe make sure that employee understands what these are and what would happen should this happen. So the issues to do with harassment needs to be in that policy. So what would happen if I discriminate someone because they are HIV positive? So they need to know what is the repercussion. And should that happen, then the repercussion needs to be followed through so that it becomes full of kwa wengine, that if I go this way, this is what will happen. Even sexual harassment, especially sexual harassment.
Yes.
We need people to know what is it can cause sexual harassment. You think it's something that is minor, but it's not minor. Tony, you need to know what can I do then someone reports that I have done sexual harassment. Is it the way I looked at them? And they are very small things. The way I touched them, the way I smiled. You can smile at a lady and then she goes crying. She has been sexually harassed. So you need to be sensitized of those things, because then if someone reports you see it's in our culture to joke a lot, to joke with people's bodies, we just many things are, we just have this thing of wanting to comment on someone's body. not
Yes.
knowing that it's actually bordering sexual harassment. And you
Yes.
can do something that would make someone feel very bad. The
Yes.
other thing is also the employees to know. I don't know if you remember, it came out, is it last year or the year before? There are so many major NGOs that came out that they were really, the bosses were the ones actually sexual harassing staff.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't know if
Yes.
you remember hashtag Me Too.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
came
Remember
out
that.
in one organization and suddenly all of them came out. It's because those employees were not educated. What they need to do if they are sexually harassed. So
Yes.
their bosses have been harassing them. It became the culture of the organization, but they are
Mhm.
just kept keeping quiet because they want to secure their small jobs. So
Yes.
training, I say training is very important because
Mm.
then everyone is aware that should I do A can happen, B can happen to me.
Mm.
Even if the court sees that you have those things, then you find your case is stronger than someone who has not done that.
Mm.
Yes.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, ladies. I can see some comments coming in. Douglas Nyamori putting it very well, saying it's very well articulated that HR expertise is a key component of any organization and needs to be recognized as that. And true, what Douglas is saying is true because many organizations, also to tie to what Martha said earlier, I remember when I got hired, my first job in the mid early 90s. That time they were called the personnel department, and 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 to be very honest with you, ladies, until my last job, where I got employed in 2016, there, I'm telling you, it's until now we started Aurum Consultants, and my partner taught me a bit about HR. I had a very negative attitude about HR and personnel department because the perception was HR is the rubber stamp of management. The HR is rubber stamp of the chief executive. When the chief executive says, I don't like that person, you find a way to be kicked out. When I don't like that person, they find a way to kick them out. I personally am a victim. I probably should have gone to court to seek litigation. But yes, issues to do with having HR, hiring HR professionals, having a clear HR policy, as Mother has put it, careful hiring processes. That's something very important. Careful hiring process. You don't just bring a CV and say, okay, only this one came from that company, is this and that, and this happens. Handling employee documentations well, is something Zipporah has brought out pretty well, and handling challenges humanely, to avoid having to go all the way to litigation and all that. And probably you ladies can confirm this with me. As Zippy had said, sometimes as an employer, as a company, you can't avoid people going to court even after doing everything right, somebody will still feel, you know what, I could get a better deal out of this. So one of the things we could advise, I personally would think that would advise employers is take take up an insurance policy called employer's liability. This one is basically something that covers you in case there are labor costs. I mean, there are costs in a court of law, employers, lawyers' fees, and all that. That can be taken care of. So, what's the final word, Zipporah? Very briefly, what's your final word as we come to a close?
My my final word will be let's do the right thing as employers, as employees. And the reason we exist, number one, is to make profit, create employment for other people, and create a difference or make a difference in the society. Let's not be the ones who are creating unnecessary challenges for our employees. Because I believe by the time you're engaging someone, you've already seen something in this person that you need. So let's not create unnecessarily handles in the organization that would be potential risks for us in the long run. Let's do what is right for our employees. And I'm sure if we do that, our employees will give the best as well. So yes, we might have challenges, but the question will be then, how do we deal with these challenges that will come? Because in any society, there will be challenges. In any relationships, there will be disagreements. how do we handle these disagreements? How do we handle these challenges?
Thank you. Martha, what's your final word?
My final word is policies, policies, policies. My other final word is that it's very good to hire HR professionals, not just Tony where you work. That one was not a HR professional. That was someone put there to work. For HR professionals, they will ensure you conduct fair dealings across board. They will ensure that your recruitment, your performance appraisal processes, procedures, your even termination procedures are to the notch. They will not agree for those small things that the managers want them to do. You need to conduct exit interviews for departing employees. For those people, you can learn a lot from the areas that you need improved and address, or you detect what is happening where you are not able to put level. That process is very important. And those things can only be done by a HR who, within an organization that has a clearly defined HR manual that defines the procedures, processes, and that HR manual must also be in line or be better than the law. So as we say, the law is the minimum. And lastly, always have a labor lawyer to just call upon when you're in need. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. Ladies, you have really hit this well. I can see Pamela Yeke saying that issue of sexual harassment is highly overlooked in most organizations and taken very lightly. More work needs to be done in that area. That is very true, Pamela. That's something I've seen left, right, center. Just observing, I have seen ladies undergo some stuff you're wondering. Do we have, are males created higher than women in the workplace and all that? Yeah, that's something that needs to be hammered home, pretty well. But ladies, you have really done this wonderfully. Anyone listening to us today, if you have an ear to hear, you will hear. Especially if you're running your own business, you are a senior manager, you want to turn things around in your company, or you are a startup, you're wondering, how do I proceed? Things are straight and simple. Hire a HR professional or get a HR consultant, get a HR lawyer to consult with, and then follow policies pretty well. Follow them keenly, and you'll avoid a lot of these pitfalls. So, ladies, thank you very much for coming in today. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. We hope that you'll come in next week. If you want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through emails, even through our phone lines, as what you can see at the bottom of our screen. Thank you for logging in. We hope to see you next week. Kwaherini.
Thank you.